Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Democratic View. I'm the hostess. My name is Phyllis Italiano, and with me I have a man who I'm sure you all know, who is our councilman, Peter Van Scoyoc, and he's going to bring us up to date on a lot of things that have been going on that are of great importance to us here living in this precious town of East Hampton. Welcome, Peter.
Thanks for having me back on the show, Phyllis.
Again and again.
Great to be here.
So, tell us what's going on that we should be aware of.
Well, part of what's going on right now is our continued efforts to improve our water quality here in town, both drinking water and surface waters. As you know, this past summer we had a number of harmful algal blooms within various ponds and bays, and so we've been working very hard to address those issues where we can. And I had actually some very good news from our preliminary report. We're working in conjunction with the Cornell Cooperative Extension through our Natural Resources Department on several projects within the town, and we've received several $100,000 worth of grant money, some of which came from the Suffolk County water tax, which is the 0.25% water tax, for water improvement within 3 Mile Harbor and Accabonac Creek.
Great.
Cornell Cooperative Extension is just working on finalizing a draft report on their pilot program within Pussy's Pond in Accabonac, and they have some very good news in terms of removing nitrogen from that portion of Accabonac Creek. So we're very excited about the effectiveness of their pilot, and their research is helping us to address nitrogen problems within that water body, and we should be able to model that and expand it outward from there. So that's very exciting.
Yeah, in case people don't know, nitrogen comes from septic systems and your own body. It's the contaminant, I guess you want to call it, from your urine and the breakdown of protein. And it builds up in areas, and what happens is then these very toxic algal blooms start to happen, which are very destructive. You know, I can remember when I first went out to Fire Island how in the early 60s the scallops used to dance along the shore. It was amazing. And you could pick up a bushel of them in Great South Bay in 20 minutes. And 1980s, that bay turned brown, and we never saw them again. Never.
Yeah, the brown tide in, I think it was 87, around that period of time, was absolutely devastating all over Long Island and elsewhere in New England, and most of our bays never really fully recovered from that.
That's true.
Massive shellfish die-offs. Many of our creeks became nearly devoid of life there for a period of time. You know, I don't think there's ever been conclusive science as to what exactly triggered that, but we do know from research that's ongoing that these harmful algal blooms are triggered by phosphorus and nitrogen leaching into the groundwater and eventually into the bays and creeks. And you mentioned, humans as being a source of that. It's not just with septic, but it's also with fertilizers as well. You know, people who clear their properties and fertilize their lawns, particularly in close proximity to these water bodies. Also, that contributes to the nitrogen loading within the ponds and whatnot. And the algal blooms take oxygen out of the water as they decay, and that can kill off fish. We saw a large fish kill up in Peconic River in the spring this year that was pretty massive, and one of the causes was lack of oxygen due to algal blooms. Yeah. So, we're very aware of the problem. We're working to address that. I have reason to be optimistic because I think there's, attention has been brought to bear, not just here in East Hampton, and I will say East Hampton's ahead of much of the rest of the county in terms of addressing those issues, but because there's such focus and interest, I think we're on the cusp of really getting ahead of the problem and being able to deal with it effectively. So I'm optimistic at the direction that we're taking and the inroads that we're making. One of the ways that we've protected our waters here in East Hampton has been through the purchase of open space and limiting development. And, we know now that even that is not enough due to legacy issues with, water that's the groundwater, which has been impacted through decades of development. And we're only just now seeing the effects of that. So there are legacy issues, nitrogen getting into the groundwater, and the travel times in some of these areas could be 10, 15, even 25 years to reach our harbor. So in some of those places, we're just now seeing the impacts of development that happened 25 years ago. So it's important that we find ways to treat this problem at the source, but also to protect the water bodies. So one of the efforts that we're looking at is to use permeable reactive barriers. The concept is that the groundwater flows through a substance which then bonds and takes the nitrogen out of the water before it reaches the water body. So that's promising technology. We have grants. We have a $325,000 grant in 3 Mile Harbor to do just that at the head of the harbor. We have another grant for $125,000. We're going to be doing a project up by Gann Road, and as I said, Cornell is working with us in our Natural Resources Department, who's headed by Kim Shaw, who does a terrific job.
Incredible.
The energy she brings to this effort
I know.
really benefits us all, and so I'm very excited to work with her on a regular basis to see these projects forward, and I'm really pleased with the amount of work that's gotten done already. We have a really strong groundwork. So as I mentioned before, the CPF allowed us to buy large amounts of open space. About 40% of East Hampton is now preserved. It's something like 70% in the hamlet of Montauk. That bill is up for reauthorization this November to extend the CPF program.
Explain the CPF program, maybe.
So it's basically a transfer tax, so that when a property changes hands, the buyer pays 2% of the cost of the property into the Peconic Regional Community Preservation Fund, and that money sits in that fund for the purpose of buying recreational property, open space, historic properties within the town to help preserve community character and to preserve our quality of life, basically. And as part of that reauthorization, Fred Thiel, our assemblyman for the state, is proposing to allow up to 20% of that fund to be used towards water quality improvement and protection projects. So we're in the process of developing a plan for various projects that would qualify, and so that we'll be able to present that to the voters for authorization through referendum this November. So there'll be 2 referendums at least with the CPF, one to reauthorize the program for land acquisition, and second to allow for up to 20% of those proceeds to be used for water quality protection and improvement. And that could be restoration of marine ecosystems, dealing with septic issues, water runoff projects, all that sort of thing. So I think that's very exciting.
It's very exciting. It truly is. I mean, I don't think that when I started doing this show 4 years ago, even I was as aware of the condition of water. It's only as I've interviewed so many different people, and the town has also presented this, particularly in the last couple of years, of how really dangerous it is. I mean, you know, I've often said the same old thing that I say all the time. I'm going to be the first one to know when we can't drink the water, and my house will be for sale before anybody else, because who can live in a place where you can't drink the water?
Right.
You've got to be,
And you know, we are, you know, 92, 93% water, our biology.
That's right.
I think on the East End, that percentage is closer to 98% for those who live here.
Especially
That's
people
probably
like
due
me.
to the, you know, you swim every day, I know, during the
I do,
summer.
twice a day,
And,
twice a day. So I'm
yeah.
the first one in and the last one out.
Right.
But, you know, and it's true that it's such an important thing to realize that our whole economy really is based upon the fact that we have beautiful, pristine water, and that we can drink what's in our house and take our showers and things like that. And it's very, very important to maintain that. And everybody has to be aware of certain basic things, like not throwing any medications down the toilet. You know, I keep them in my car, and then I go to South 50 drugstore, and I put them all in that big red box. And
That's good. That's a good example.
yeah, it is. It's an important thing to do, and it ain't so hard to do, really.
Well, I think just being conscious of what you do on the land impacts the water below your feet, which is what you're drinking. Whether you have public water out here or if you have private well water, it all comes from the same aquifer.
That's right.
And you know,
And that's something
eventually
else.
that all gets into the surface waters and bays and creeks and whatnot also. So, you know, nature's very resilient. You just have to give her some space to do what she needs to do.
And another thing people don't realize
Don't overwhelm her.
is also what you do today, you know, in our particular case out here, you know, affects people down the road, you know, a long time from now, because it takes a while for it to go down through the different layers of the aquifer.
Well, that's why it's so important that we be addressing it now. It's not just for us now, it's for future generations, so that we can preserve what we have for their enjoyment.
So I also noticed that some of the properties that have the CPF fund has bought, and by the way, that law was passed through a referendum also,
Yes.
Am I correct?
That's correct.
And so some of those properties I know where I am are along where Hog Creek is. They have bought some of you guys have bought
Right.
some of that.
Well, we did recently buy 2 waterfront parcels in that Hog Creek watershed there.
Very important.
So
Very, very important.
it's important to, you know, give that space as a buffer,
Yeah.
so that natural systems can help take up some of the runoff and whatever pollutants might take place on land, but it also becomes a wildlife corridor, and it becomes another access point for the public. And you know, you talked about the water being so important to our economy. It is, but in conjunction with the fact that we have so much access to that water. It's not privatized. We've continued to expand public access to our waters that are so important, so the public can enjoy it. And that really, you know, drives everybody's property values up, having that, you know, open public beach and access to, you know, our natural resources.
And our bays, our bay is just so vital to, you know, and so gorgeous. I go in there, I can see my toes and my nail polish on my toes.
So it's another water quality project that we're working on in conjunction with the town aquaculture department. John Barley Dunn, the town board recently authorized a pilot project for oyster grow out, where community members can sign on and pay a fee of about $250 and get 1,000 seed oysters, which they will be given equipment to grow out in cages within a specific location. And halfway through that process, half the oysters go back to the East Hampton Aquaculture Program, and the remaining half gets to be grown out for consumption by those who participate. So that's exciting on many levels. First of all,
You'll be growing your oysters.
You're growing your own oysters, which if you like oysters like I do.
Are you kidding?
It's not a bad thing.
Anybody who doesn't like oysters, I really.
So,
oh
and
my
that's
God,
called
I love them.
EH-SEED, which is an acronym for East Hampton Shellfish Education Enhancement Directive or something of that sort. But
and so you literally put these.
So the way the aquaculture, standard aquaculture for growing out oysters is now is you get the tiny little seed oysters, which are not much bigger than a pencil eraser, if that big. And they're kept in a bag, in a mesh bag, to protect them from predators, which is then inside of a wire cage, and it's placed in the water. And they're filter feeders, so they filter out algae.
Yes.
They feed on algae and zooplankton and phytoplankton. So they continually grow, and as they grow, you shift them into different sized mesh bags and within the cage, and they grow pretty rapidly. They're about 2 years to get to be dinner plate ready, if you will.
I like that.
And or if you like to shuck them, you don't need a dinner plate. You can have them on the half shell. They come with their own little dinner plate.
God.
And you know, one thing that a lot of people don't realize is that our shellfish and our finfish too, menhaden particularly, do an expert job of filtering the water.
Yes.
And taking out these excess algae, if you will. So a single adult oyster could filter up to 50 gallons of water, just one oyster per day. So you couple that with schools of menhaden swimming through the waters, purifying the water. So, you know, that only exacerbated the quality of water when we lost all the shellfish during the brown tide, because it's sort of like taking the lungs out of the
It's a good
our water body. So
So
we're trying to promote, you know, oysters back in our waters to help grow out shellfish. They also will spawn within those waters. The larvae float around free and then will attach themselves to a piece of shell or another oyster or the side of a rock. And, you know, once they attach, they're there for the duration of their life.
So where would I grow these? Where do I grow them? I mean, do I just go to, can I walk along the shore and
No, you have to have a permit to grow oysters under the regulations of the state. So the town has a permit to grow, and this pilot project will allow a limited number of members of the community to participate in the project. It is just a pilot project. You know, I do hope over time that we'll get to a position where, you know, people who have waterfront properties will participate, that we'll be able to expand this program out. You know, they'll be able to hang cages of oysters off their dock or, you know, along their shoreline. The more oysters you have in the water, the cleaner the water is going to get. There are a lot of benefits to having oysters in the water, not just the fact that they're cleaning the water, but they also create habitat for a number of other animals.
yes?
They attract small fin fish and crabs and any number of other organisms. So
That sounds absolutely.
helping to restore our traditional, you know, ecosystems.
It's
is
fascinating.
part of that
really,
water
really.
cleaning effort.
And you just, so how am I going to be able to do this? I go to the town.
Well, as I said, this particular project is very limited in terms of numbers of participants. I think it's going to be limited to something like 15 or 20 people, and it's a $250 fee, and they would have to contact the aquaculture department to sign up. And I don't know when the sign-up is going to be open, but I believe that project will kick off this spring. And
those are the people that are located north of 27 on the way to Montauk?
Well, we have a couple different spots. There's a hatchery in Montauk down near Navy Road, Rough Riders. But people can go to the town website and look up the phone number. It's probably also
That's a good idea.
It's also probably in the phone book if you still have one of those.
I certainly
You
do.
can look it up online.
Yes, I have a landline too.
Good for you.
Yeah, I'm old-fashioned.
Yeah, that's all right.
But, you know, I'm really excited also about hopefully soon Suffolk County is going to be able to come up with some kinds of septic systems that will be not, you know, so expensive that we will be able to change our septic, whatever we got in the back over there, you know.
Right.
And
Well, we are certainly looking forward to having an approved system that drastically reduces nitrogen so that on new construction, we could make that a requirement. And retrofitting existing systems and putting forward a process by which people could do that. And it may even be something that could be subsidized at some level based on means, or, you know, that's part of a discussion further down the road. But
something like what we had with the oil tanks, kind of?
yeah, I mean, you know, I think if you can incentivize the corrective action, then it's likely to happen much more smoothly and quickly. So
That's what I'm waiting for.
you don't still have an oil tank, do you?
Oh, God, no. No, as soon as I heard of it, it was the first one that changed, you know. But my septic.
You do have a septic, and you know
Absolutely.
that's one of the things that I think I didn't really understand when I first started looking into this issue, and I think many people still don't understand, is that the old single cesspool, you know, there's really a negligible difference between a current approved system, which is septic tank and leaching pools, versus a single cesspool. There's negligible. Getting tongue-tied.
Yeah.
All that oyster thought on my mind here. But, you know, that there's really very little difference in the amount of nitrogen released by each of those two systems. So,
You know, I have said many times that even if you're putting in and changing, you think you are updating your septic system.
Right.
It's obsolete.
yes.
I mean,
It is.
only when Suffolk County gives us those approved choices that we will be able to do something, which is why I haven't moved on it. And I am dying to do that because I'm tired of feeling guilty and watching everything I put into my, you know, my dishwasher, my washing machine, you know, soaps and shampoos and everything, to make sure that whatever I'm doing is not hurting the water. I mean, we all have to be conscious of that kind of thing. We really do.
Now, Suffolk County does have a better system that they will approve for intermediate flow systems, which is 1,000 gallons or more. So that'd be more like a restaurant or hotel or some location that has a higher flow rate. And we're in the process of looking at legislation that would require new projects with intermediate flow to meet the current standard that the highest, best available technology that Suffolk County has now approved, and make that a requirement in order to be in compliance. So that's close on the horizon.
Well, I must say I have been very interested and very proud of some of the things that you guys have done in the last couple of years. It's very encouraging, you know, to know that there are people who sort of have their ear to the ground and know the things that have to be done in order to make sure that we keep East Hampton, East Hampton.
Well, I'm really fortunate to live here, Phyllis, and I think being surrounded by people who value their surroundings and their environment and want to preserve and protect that, being a part of that, it's been terrific, and I'm just very happy to be able to do what I can do to move those issues forward.
Well, that's great, because it's you know, I've often said, you know, I turned that corner down there by that pond and fell madly in love with this town. And I have never, ever stopped thinking that it's I am so happy to be here. I mean, a lot of people go away, you know, come wintertime they go away, but boy, do I love it here in the winter too.
It's a very special place. I was just down on the beach, yesterday, and was taking some photographs and looking at the way the beach has changed in profile this time of year versus summertime, and the people who aren't here in the wintertime have no appreciation for the seasonal change that we go through and just the shape and profile of the beach. And we've had a couple of storms that have churned the waters, and we've had some erosion, and we have some pretty steep drop-offs if you go down to Main Beach or Montauk or anywhere in Amagansett or Wayne-Scott along the beach there. There's just a 6 or 7 foot shelf in places where the gradual beach started and ran all the way down to the water, and now it's just a sheer wall of sand, and the waves are lapping at it on high tide, and the sand gets torn away from the beach and sits offshore in a bar. And when the winds change around southwest in the summer, that sand hopefully will all move back on.
Well, that's exactly what happens. I mean, after 35 years at Fire Island, I watched it all the time. I mean, it would go out, especially with the nor'easter, and come back in the summertime. And one of the things I remember most vividly is coming back after living a year in California and saying to people, do you realize that this sand you have here is really sugar? It's so gorgeous compared to what other beaches are like. I know you do, and thank you so much,
Thanks so much
Peter,
for having me on your show again,
because you know what?
Pleasure to be here.
We need Don Quixotes like you to be out there fighting for us and keeping our area as beautiful as it is, because it's the best place to live as far as I'm concerned.
Oh, I have to agree with you there.
I know.
I love it.